Now we move on to the last then lecture from Catherine. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to present some work we're doing in our community. So I'm working on body conversational agents. So those are agents with a body, and we're focusing a lot, not on the speech, but on the non-verbal behaviors. Okay. So all the examples I'm going to show you is with speech synthesis that we use as a black box. We don't work on speech in the lab because we have no knowledge on speech. So you will have to bear with me if you are here I heard, because I mean, really, it's just a pure black box for that. Doesn't mean it's not interesting at all. So I'm very glad to be here, especially if you work on doing good synthesis and publicly available that we can use. So that would be wonderful. So let me show you a bit the outline. I will present in general what is an evaluation study. And when we talk about evaluation study, we talk a lot about experiments, experimental studies or perceptive studies. So not so much on objective measures that you just mentioned for speech synthesis. So we do have some, but most of the times it's on perceptive studies. Then I will introduce what is a conversational agent, how to build one, what nonverbal behaviors, I mentioned communicative gesture, facial expression, head movement, all that, architecture, implementation, and also example of evaluation studies and some of the methods you can use. All right. So when you want to conduct an evaluation studies, one thing that you have to know is what do you want to measure? Okay, what are you looking for? What do you want to find out that you did well in your implementation? Okay, and how can you decide what is your hypothesis, what is your research questions, what is your measures? So that is really not easy to do. It takes a lot of time, first of all, to do an evaluation study. Don't think you can do it in just one day, okay? It's really very, very long. So you can have very different way of driving your evaluation study. Some can come from theory. For example, you have some a priori knowledge and you want to test if you can find it in your models. Or you can use deductive reasonings. And lately, there's quite a lot of things done in data-driven observation. So you analyze data, you extract some analysis, you build a models, and after you evaluate your models, could you find, again, the same result from your data-driven hypothesis? Mm-hmm. You may have also different types of hypotheses. Some should be more like descriptive hypothesis. For example, you want to predict the relationship between variables. Let's say that you have a facial expression. You want to study emotions. You study a lot of emotional speech also, okay? So you want to validate some of your models, all right? So one thing that you've learned from theory, a lot of studies have been done by psychology that find out the relationship between an emotions and its value and acoustic cues. So you can have to reproduce those acoustic cues in your models and test was it done. So that would be theory driven also. But also you may want to find out, you have some emotions and you want to find out what would be the expressions or the acoustic cues that is linked to these emotions, okay? So you want to predict what would be the relationship between a given emotion and its multimodal expression, visual and or acoustic. While in the causal hypothesis, the aim is to predict the causes of a particular behaviors. And here you want to understand why this person is feeling this emotion. Why is this person showing this particular emotion? So the way you're going to do it is by manipulating some variables, for example, here some expressions, to measure what would be their impact in perception, for example. Okay? So you will do, as a hypothesis, some prediction between the cause of particular variables onto the perception. And you interrupt me, by the way, if you have any questions, all right? When you define studies, you have to define different variables. The independent variables are the variables that is manipulated by the researchers, all right? So it would be the factors which the experimenter thinks will affect the behaviors. All right. So, for example, it can be genders, it can be different emotions, while the dependent variables are the variables of interest that you want to measure. For example, here it will be the different F0 features or different facial actions that will be that you want to measure and to see what impact it will have. However, in all studies you're conducting, there's a lot of variables you don't control. And for example, it can be the gender of the participants they evaluate, the age of the participants, their cultures, and that is not always easy to control. Or it can be the time of the day, how the hot is the room and things like that, that will affect your perception. Okay, so those are, for sure, when you conduct an experiment, you do have to consider the two different types of variables. Here, you should do as much as possible. So when you do a study, try to conduct it in the same ambience as possible, but it's not always easy. Regarding participants, how to recruit participants, it's a really tough task. So for example, in the Department of Psychology, all the professors, they impose that students do at least 2 evaluation studies to have their credit. Okay? So it's a good way to have students participating to study. If you're not from psychology, it's not so easy, okay? And you cannot always ask your students, colleagues, because first of all, it's just one type of evaluation. Participants, you want some time to cover much larger people. So finding in the laboratory is tough. And after you can do online surveys, but, so you put your system on the web, we've done it a lot. You put your system on the web and you ask to be evaluated. And yeah, it works, but I mean, it doesn't work for if you want to do an interaction. That's not possible. And when you do online surveys, or even Mechanical Turk or a Crowdflower, this type of surveys, also, you don't control in which condition the person is conducting the survey. So it's also not easy to do. And after, when you have the participants, you want to select certain type of participants, as I mentioned, maybe some cultures, genders, age, professions, education, I mean, any types of, or even personalities and all that, any types of parameters you may want to use. And it can be interesting to gather those information, and I will show you an examples at the end of the course. All right. So when you have all that in mind, that you know you have to decide all the different parameters before conducting the studies, we need to design it. And when you want to design, so you want to test some hypothesis, you need to see which variables you're going to manipulate. Just imagine when, even for you, I mean, doing speech synthesis, okay, for me it's one modality, but how many parameters do you have? You have tons, okay? You have many parameters. Which one are you going to vary to understand how it affects the perception? If you modulate all of them, how would you know which variables affect the perception? All right, so you really have to look for the variables that will be pertinent for your study. And after you have 2 different types of things. So you want to have, in the perception studies, you want to manipulate variables, okay? So let's say emotions, okay? You want to see that person is able to recognize the different emotions you have been implementing in your systems. Either you can have a between subject, that means that you have different individuals we assign to the different emotions, or you can have within subject, and you have the same people that will do all the stimuli. So you can have a group of persons that will be assigned to, for example, one emotion or one group of stimuli. If you want to, for example, to evaluate 1,000 stimuli, how can you ask a person to evaluate 1,000 stimuli? It's not possible, okay? So you may want to have groups, to have several, to cut down the number of stimuli that a person will evaluate. Okay, so that would be a between subject. Or if you have less, sometimes it's interesting that same persons evaluate all the different stimuli, okay? And you have pros and cons, which each of them. So when you have between subjects, since it's not the same people are evaluating all the stimuli, you have a lot of individual differences. When it is within subject, you may have the order effect. That means that the order you present in the stimuli. So you have to make sure that you have a random assignment of the stimuli. And also, people get quite often bored after listening to the similar stimuli, so you have to be careful on that. Finally, you have to find out the different scales you want to measure them, okay? So you may have nominal scales, for example, the gender, female, male. I mean, now I've seen that in America, they use even more categories, but still, I mean, it's a set of categories. You have ordinal scales, to be a certain ordering, 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever. You have a continuous measuring, for example, using qualitative data. So here to be not anxious, a bit anxious, very anxious, extremely anxious, and things like that. You do have ranking of the stimuli, but what you notice here is that the differences between the categories are not uniforms. Okay, it's not like 1, 2, 3, 4 that are uniformly separated, like it would be interval scales. Okay, so the difference at the perceptual level between not and a bit is different from a bit and very and very and extremely. So you have to be sure that depending on the scales you're using, you will have to use different statistical measures.
Catherine, may I ask something? Mm-hmm. In this case, for instance, if we say not anxious, okay, the gender, it's or marital status, okay, but not anxious, bit anxious is very personal. I mean, you cannot identify. Of course, everybody can say, no, I'm a bit anxious. You can say also a bit anxious, but these are two different things. How do you? So
that is a problem of the perceptive studies. Okay, that is it's one of the difficulties. So that's why you need a quite high number of participants to make sure that the differences you will get are statistically valid. This, I didn't mention it, but for example, in an emotion, I work quite a lot on emotions, so that's why I'm referring to these examples. There was this notion of field trace, which is a continuous annotation scheme. So here you have time, and you have one dimension. It's easier to do it in 1D. And for example, the valence. If an emotion is positive or negative, okay? Valence. Right. And you ask participants to evaluate as they watch a video, as they watch a stimuli, how is it perceived, the emotion along the valence dimension of the person on the videos. And for example, you start here, time 0, and you go on. All right. Another person may start here, and it may vary. But so it's well known that people have individual differences that could come from cultures. I mean, but it's not how it's people. I mean, they talk more about individual differences in the perception. So how do you encompass in this type of evaluation studies when you start at the wrong, not at the same, not as wrong. Nothing is wrong with perceptive study, okay? At the different things. So sometimes you look at the graduation. How does it vary? And it's how we're doing it in the lab. So we just look at the variation, okay? And lately there's been work on transforming such continuous evaluation into ordinal scale also. So it helps to because after you need to have agreement between the annotators, for example, and things like that. So, yeah, no, but it is a problem. Yeah, that is.
I have a question. Sure. MOS is Likert scale, right?
Yeah.
How do you make sure it's equally spaced? Because you have also the descriptions of of.
So we put
So
numerical
it's very
below.
similar to the continuum measurements,
Yeah.
like, about the quality measurements. So how do we make sure it's equally spaced?
So for example, the way we're going to do it, if we put numbers below. 0, for example, not anxious to be from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and things like that. So we put to the 2 annotation in.
But yeah, I agree. MOS is like 1 to 5, but still subjectively they may not be equally spaced.
What do you mean? If
The interval might not be equally in a continuum, right? We are just giving descriptions of something, what is a continuum, but how do we make sure they are equally spaced actually in the perceptual space?
Oh, but that is a problem, and psychology hasn't resolved the problems.
Yeah.
So the way we're going to do it in the lab, in a very somehow simple way, you do not at all. And for example, it says 1, a bit, 2. So like that we'll be able to indicate. This should be, the same distance, but we cannot infer if it is at the perceptive level really different. I fully agree on that, but I don't have an answer. Yeah. Okay, another thing that we have to study and is this notion if the stimuli is done context-free. Like for example, when you ask people to listen to a word, to listen to a stimuli, or in context. Okay, and the way we're going to do it, because we're working onto an interaction, and it's what you want to do when you were using a speech synthesis. It's going to be done in interaction. You may want to evaluate the different stimuli first in context-free manners and after in context. But in context, you have a lot of variation and a lot of variables you don't always control, okay? So when you do in context, often we introduce the notion of a control situations, and you're going to measure the differences in perception between the control conditions and the condition you want to measure. Okay, no, so it won't be out of the blue. And after, you can also measure different things on when you want to see how, for example, an expression of emotions will impact the interactions. So you may have, as a control condition, the interaction happens with no emotions, or and in the condition with different emotions, and you want to have objective measures. And when we talk here about objective measures, could be done through sensors. So you can analyze the facial expression of the participants, you can have physiological data, and you can have also subjective measures, so through questionnaires, using the different scales I've been mentioning, okay? And sometimes you don't always find the same measures, okay? So it's a difficulty. Okay, so that it was a general introductions for how to conduct perceptive study. So let me show you rapidly how we built those virtual agents, those embodied conversational agents. What we call a conversational agent is those virtual characters that are they're autonomous, so it's not avatars, all right? They're able to express themselves verbally and non-verbally, and they're interactive. So that means that we're aiming to have those virtual agents that are able to have a conversation with humans, okay? Being autonomous, that means that they have to perceive and understand what the user is saying. They have also to plan what to say. They have to know when to start a conversation, when to finish it. And also they have to know how to express themselves, with which expressivity, which display. So we want to create those virtual agents following several things. First of all, they should be able to communicate multimodally. When we don't communicate like that, if I communicate like that without moving, you use my no expression, my no movement as an information, and not always a positive one, okay? So the fact that if you have a body that normally infers you're going to do movement, if you don't do it, it's an information, all right? So it should communicate multimodally. We want the agent, that is often the hypothesis, that simulate the cognitive and expressive human capabilities. So we will look and we refer on human data to build our models. So this is a strong hypothesis for us. But I mean, and the agent being a partner in a conversation with the humans should display a wide range of social-emotional behaviors. It shouldn't be impulsive, it shouldn't be impolite and all that. So it should be absolutely socially aware and emotionally competent. And as mentioned, it should be able to hold multimodal social interaction. And interaction, it means you're a speaker, but also a listener, all right? So all the work I'm going to present here is mainly as an agent as a speaker. But if when the agent talks, it has a flow, it looks at the speakers as the users, adapt its behavior to the user and all that. And afterwards, when the user has a turn and the agent frees, you can imagine what happens to the conversation. It's not so easy to go on. So you do have to have it both speaker and listeners. So generally how it goes. So we have the agent is endowed with some perceptive capabilities and is able to have some cognitive process, reactive process, make a decision on how to answer to the user's behaviors, verbal and non-verbal, and send a reaction. So, for example, here, the agent perceives the human is smiling. Smile can have very, very different functions. So how to interpret the smile in a given context, interaction context. Here it says, oh, the human is showing me his friendships. So in that case, I want to show my friendship tools, I will mirror his smile. So the virtual agent may decide smiles, and it will smile back. And that has to be done in real times at the frame level. Okay. So since you're talking so much about speech, I decided to show you how the importance of nonverbal behavior. So I'm going to give you very fast some hint on the importance of considering nonverbal behaviors. So communication is not only a transfer function. We know that it's sharing entities, interacting with each other. It involved a lot of processes, as already mentioned, and we have verbal and nonverbal. Okay. For nonverbal behavior, sometimes it's also called body language, and Bergen is giving an interesting definition where she defines it as those behavior other than words themselves that form a socially shared coding systems, that is, they are typically sent with intent, typically interpreted as intentionals, used with regularities among members of a speech community, and have consensually recognized interpretation. For example, the gesture I've been doing here, you interpret it as not me holding on the board for not falling, but as a didactic gesture. I'm pointing, here is the things where you should gather your gaze, because that's a point of interest, all right? And that, I don't have to say it, I mean, you know it. So Bergen mentioned that nonverbal behaviors is message orientation. It has a communicative function. It regards, of course, senders and receivers, and they are dynamic. Okay, they may be intentional, but we won't look at non-intentional behaviors, crashing your head when you have a hitch, or something like that. The difficulty with non-verbal behaviors is that they have different meaning. So, for example, a raised eyebrows, it can be a mark of surprise. You can use it to mark your pitch accent, to emphasize the words, or to mark a question. And as I said, they're socially shared, but they can be also idiosyncratic, that means linked to you. You have a particular way of expressing yourself. So different function of nonverbal behaviors, there are a lot of communicative intent or production and reception. For message, it can carry propositional content, like, for example, I catch such a fish, for those who are going fishing, and you show the size of the fish. That was not said through the words, it was said through the gestures. Okay? It can express emotion, manage the interaction, all the turn-takings happening, speaker turn-takings. And also, it's also used for internal regulation, for attention, managing cognitive load, emotional regulation, expression of felt emotions, as well as external regulation like impression, formation and management, social attitude you want to convey to your interactant, and different interpersonal relationship, and all that. All right, nonverbal behaviors involves the whole body, okay? It involves facial expression, gesture, gaze, posture, head movement, voice, as well as touch. Lately, we're starting working on the notion of social touch, which is very important also in communication. And what is important here is that, as we said, behavior can have a different function. So what is a link somehow between mind and body? And that is really tough because, I mean, you have to interpret nonverbal behaviors. You have to take into account the context. So let me show you a very simple table for head movement. Okay, head movement, after all, is very simple. It's a rotation. Okay, if you want to model it, I mean, it's 3D rotation, and it can have the head nod can have very different meaning. It can be a sign of affirmation, like that. It can be back channels. So here may be a bit faster and a bit lower amplitude. Self-correction for I got it wrong, and for to say everything, or you often do it with your movement of the head. You're listing 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, and you may have and all that. Okay. So, and you have also with smile. Smile is said to have more than 50 different functions. And it's linked to emotion, but also linked to polite, but it's also linked to different attitude or greetings. It can have something like that. So, and the differences will be done through facial features and body cues, symmetry of the facial features, and also the dynamisms of the action. So how fast is arriving the smiles and how long it will last and things like that. If you don't do that when you meet somebody in the street, it's just what you call sometimes it's replacing a hello. I mean, in a fast way. It's not that you're showing you're happy to see the person. Okay, so now that we've seen the importance of nonverbal behaviors, buildings, those agent. So the objective is that I want to model a virtual agent that is able to smile in an appropriate way. Okay, you don't want to have the agent smiling all the times, but you want it smiles at proper manners. So the big steps is you gather the corpus, you analyze it, you may to understand how people smile, when do they smile, which smile do they use, and all that. Then you implement it in your agent, and after you evaluate it. And you can have different ways of evaluating it. Is it believable? So in our community, we often use the word believable rather than realist. Realism is a different, okay? Is it believable, or does it behave similarly to a human or not? And is that important in your application that the agent behave similarly to humans? So as I said, the approach is as follows, and especially, so we gather data, and gathering data is the same for you. I mean, it's extremely complex. You analyze it at different levels. It can be at the behavior levels, but also it can be higher level. For example, if you're working on emotion, which emotion does it shows, how engaged the person's, which social attitude do they show, what is the relationship with the partners and all that. So you can have very different high-level informations. You build your models, you implement it, and after you evaluate it. And from your evaluation, you find that, of course, you have gaps, and you haven't really reproduced what you found in your data. So it's an iterative process. You go back to your data, find out what was missing in your analysis or in your implementation, and back and forth. So the way we're going to refine our models is really built on the evaluation. It's when you understand what is wrong, what is missing, what what your model was not able to capture that you're able to go and evaluate and find out again in your model. So the first thing is to build a corpus. To build a corpus, we can have, building a corpus, it used to be the same for you. I mean, working just on speech, it used to be quite easy up to the 80s, where you could put a hidden camera and you had very naturalistic data. Now it's forbidden, okay? So people working on emotions have been using a lot of acted data, but the expression, even of very good actors, the expression of emotion of very good actors are very different from expression of emotion that are really felt. So people are trying to induce data. I'm going to show you an examples where we induce data later on. And also we can have TV shows. So we can have also different setting, hidden camera, but now we were able to use hidden camera data from Klaus Scherer's lab. That he had hidden camera in an airport in Switzerland, and in you know, when you lost your luggage, it happened to some of you here, and you go and report that you lost your luggage, and he put a camera as the passengers, so he could record. Of course, it was somehow negative situation, didn't have a lot of positive emotions, and but it could have really very interesting data. But nowadays it's more on the lab, and lately we've been also using motion captures.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
There is not like a problem that you are recording people without consent?
Yeah, of course, that's why now it's forbidden to use a hidden camera.
Okay.
Yeah. But when you could use, a lot of people that work on the emotions and communicative gestures and things like that, they really used hidden camera data because they started in the 80s. So they had video, so it was not very high quality, but they really had very, very natural stimuli to look at. Now you can't. So you have much better quality videos, really high quality videos, high quality. But it's very difficult to try to have natural settings with your participants. Okay. So, for example, we work on laughter. We had an EU project just on laughter, and it took us more than a year to gather the data because we got it wrong at the beginning. All the participants met in Belfast. It was with psychology department of University of Belfast. And we wanted to reproduce the gestures, laughters, and so we had mock-up data. We had one student, of course, with some other mock-up, and everybody's watching her, and he says, laugh. Guess what? That she couldn't really laugh. I mean, you have everybody's. When we says, okay, stop, we stop recordings, and here start laughing, because I mean, you have natural conversations. So we said, okay, it doesn't work like that. So we gathered another times, and we said, laugh is happening in social situation, okay? So you need to have a social context to gather the data. So we put 3 people together, okay? And here what you get. So they had to watch videos, and they had to play games and things like that. So So there were 3 students of mine. They were always like that, I must admit. Always in the lab. But what you can see is that laughter doesn't simply involve the mouth, big mouth opens. It involves the whole body, okay? And body movement is crucial in laughter. And also, I don't know if you noticed, but they were looking at each other a lot. So gazing during a social interaction is very important. Okay, and I think that time is flying. I will go faster. Okay, so once you have the data, you have to build your multimodal repertoire, because I mean you want your agent to convey certain behaviors, so somehow you have to define the value of for the communications. So we will define a multimodal signals by their meanings and their virtual actions. And you see here one important item that is missing, context, because we don't know how to encode it. Okay? So nowadays we're trying to overcome these problems through different computational models. So for example, we have encoded the meaning and the visual action through two different representation language that is used in the lab and through the different information it conveys. So at the meaning levels, the information can be about the word, for example, didactic, iconic when I mentioned the size of a fish, but it also can provide the different degree of certainty you want, so maybe a different attitude, or information about your performatives, you want to request some things, would you give an order or suggestions, turn takings, affective states, and things like that. So let me show you two examples of a persons that communicate, just to show you how nonverbal behaviors is highly synchronized altogether. So look at this lady. Okay, so she involves her and the other persons. Anything, she does that with a head sweep. And she listens for that. And when she emphasizes something, she moves forwards. She's listening. While she's listening and doing the head movement. Okay, and she's not serious. You see how she reads that? And the part on the other side, anything? All right. Okay, so we want our virtual agent really to have this coordinating behaviors. That means that the coordination, the choice of the gestures, the choice of head movements goes with what she's saying, all right? That is really the most difficult part. And another part where we are really not there yet.
On part d'un monde d'hier dans lequel on a cette connaissance, dans lequel on essaie de comprendre les comportements.
Sorry.
De ces comportements d'acteurs qu'à rebours ont battu une pédagogie.
Okay, so.
On part d'un monde d'hier dans lequel on entassait des connaissances.
Okay, so what is important here is the use of one hand gesture or two hand gestures. So here he says we start from a word of yesterday. So starting point is on the left, because past is here and future will be there. And we pile up. And it will maintain the gesture fixed the time it says piling up. Because that is a board here, it stops here. Okay?
On va vers un monde de demain dans lequel...
So we're going from a world of tomorrow and future is in front of us. For some culture, future in the past because we don't know it. But it's still in the same axis. But for us, here it's the futures.
On essaie de comprendre les comportements d'acteurs.
You see, actors, and it says an emphasis with the hand and emphasis with the eyebrows.
Dont on aura besoin, et c'est à partir de ces comportements d'acteurs qu'à rebours, on bâtit une pédagogie.
And you see also, because I don't understand French, but when he says, and it's from that à rebours, I don't know how you say it, but from, and going backwards. So his gestures, his proceedings ahead is what he's going to say, because he's going to move forwards. So he can say, when he's there, he can say, and backwards, we will do that. So he has anticipated what he's going to say and has prepared himself before what he's going to say. And that, he's not an actor. That is just a recordings. That means all of us are doing this type of preparation and highly synchronized gestures and speech all together, and nonverbal facial expression and head movement. And it's what we want to capture in our virtual agent. All right. And you will see. So let me go with that. For the face, we are relying on FACS. I don't know if you know FACS. It's a facial action coding system that's developed by Pelachaud and Wallace-Friesen. So you have more than 200 muscles on the face. So how do you describe a facial expression? As I mentioned, smiles may have very different functions, and they all differentiate with each other. Okay, so how do you smile is not a proper way of describing the action. Okay, so you need to have annotation methods. So Pelachaud and Wallace-Friesen have determined FACS, which is commonly used, and it will describe the facial actions that are minimal facial actions that are visible. For example, on the forehead, you have the frontalis muscles, which is a large muscle, flat muscles, and you can control the inner part of the eyebrows up, the outer part of the eyebrows up also. And you can do it separately or in combination, and you have raised eyebrows. So you would describe an expression as a combination of the different expression. So for example, frowning is a corrugator here, and that goes down, and smile, it will be AU12 and things like that. So you can describe. So before you were annotating that manually. So in fact, psychologists still continue doing annotation manually. So it took you almost 6 months to become a FACS coder, a certified FACS coder. It required a lot of training, and you can imagine that doing the annotation manually requires quite a lot of times. Okay, so often 1 minute video equals 1 hour of work. Nowadays, with facial analysis tools, it's easier. Okay, they do have some error, but it's much faster. We can analyze a lot of data easily now. Sure.
Sorry, can I ask, for this, for instance, you use humans. Now, do you use, you say, image tools, but do you use also deep learning algorithms for instance, automatic algorithms to annotate?
To annotate? So we're using, now we're using publicly available tools like OpenFace, OpenSmile, OpenPose. For that. But often we go and manually adapt them, adjust them. We do that. But like before, I had when we work on the hidden camera database, the algorithm were not, the tools were not ready yet, and we did manual annotation. And our virtual agent is driven by that. So we have implemented the different action unit on our virtual agent, and to try to create facial expression on the virtual agent, we will use this annotation. And the gaze also is important. It's linked to intonation pattern, emotional state, and have different communicative functions. And also, it can provide a lot of information about the relationship between people. Look at the gaze, especially at the end. Okay, so you can imagine daughter and mother, you can get very easily their relationship, okay? They're not very positive. Turn taking, so we can have through just our body behaviors and gaze behaviors, we can also state with the speakers, do I want to keep the turns? Do I want to take the turns? Do I want to give the turn, and all that? Okay, so let's do it. Let's go for creation of the virtual agent. Often we rely in our community on what is called the cyber framework that was defined some years ago, where we'll have 3 different parts for creating the virtual agent. One, which is called the intent planning, to decide what to say, and have some information on also high-level information on how to say it. Then we're going to find out through which modality are we going to convey the different intentions. And then we're going to realize it, where we're going to synchronize the multimodal behaviors. So we have different steps, and that's where the communicative function markup language is here at the intention level, and the behavior markup language for the behaviors is here. So as I said, the function markup language encode communicative intentions, And for example, we describe the degree of certainty, different performatives, turn-taking, and all that. So, let me go. While the behavior markup language will work as a communication channel, if we describe head movement, gaze, facial expression, gesture, and speech. And we can specify starting and ending times of the behaviors, as well as the expressivity behavior, because this gesture, I can do it like that, or I can do it like that, or I can do it with a different speed, acceleration, energy, and all that. So how to produce gestures. And that will be done through an XML language. It's a bit boring. And after, we can specify the virtual agent. Okay, so here an example of our virtual agent.
In your previous professional experiences, what made you the most proud?
So here we simply provide the text she wants to say, as well as some intention, and the system will compute the multimodal behaviors. Okay, so now we can start with the evaluation study. And I'm going to present some work we've been conducting on some few years ago. And I like this study, and it was conducting with a postdoc of mine, Magali Ox, and where she wanted to look at smile. And she decomposed it into 4 different studies, and each time conducting evaluation studies. So, smile is part of social signals. The multimodal are dynamic and transient, and they can convey different functions, such as relationship, attitude, emotion, engagement, and also manage turn-taking and all that. As I mentioned, smiles is extremely well recognized, it's rapidly perceived, and it can have different types, different meanings, all right. And why smile is important? First of all, the perception of smiling behaviors of humans is showing as being sociable, generous, trustworthy, warm, and all that. So it's important for humans to smile. And the same for a virtual agent. A virtual smiling agent would be perceived as more convincing, credible, attractive, trustworthy. All right? And that is at the perception level. But on the task level, we find out a smiling virtual agent also will motivate more the users, will create enthusiasm, and may help users to take decision. So smile for humans and for virtual agent is important. So that's why it is important to study and undo virtual agent with smile, but not smiling at any cost and with any type of smiles. So to study smile, we're conducting 4 different studies. One which is linked to the creation of a corpus, and after validation of the corpus in a free context study, as I mentioned earlier, validation of the corpus in a context, in a very controlled context. Then we measure the effect of the different smiles on the user's perception. How does he perceive the virtual agent, and in particular related to his social stance, and also the effect of smile during an interaction. So when we work on smile, it was part of a network of excellence called SSPNet, and at the times the tools for facial action recognition were not yet there. So, and to annotate smiles, a different type of smiles, was just too time consuming, we didn't have. So we decided to use a very different approach, where we asked participants to create their own smile on the agent. So it was even before crowdsourcing. So we looked at the literatures in psychology and tried to find out the different parameters that involved in a smile. So you can have the corner mouth up, opening of the mouth, tenseness on the lips, the speed of the appearance and disappearance of a smile, and how long it lasts, and things like that. So we have created different types of the parameters, and through an interface, the participant could manipulate the different parameters and create the smiles. And after, they would say how happy they were, satisfied they were with the smiles they created. So we asked participants to create 3 types of smiles: happy, polite and embarrassed. That was the task they have to do. And they manipulated the parameters. And at the end, they say, and in no time, we got quite a lot of smiles annotated. And people were very happy to done it. Okay? So when you've got all the data, we perform some measure to find out characteristics of the different smiles. Once we've got this corpus, we have to see how it is perceived. So the first thing was to validate the different smile corpus in a free context. So, in a context, sorry. So we asked, we found out 3 different scenarios that were depicting very polite, amused, and embarrassed context, and those scenarios has been validated by providing those type of context. And participants, we had 75 participants that were presenting with scenario and clips of 3 different smiles, and they were asked to select the most appropriate smile for the situation. Okay, so here is a scenario. Here's the different videos, and after they indicate the appropriateness of the smile. And for example, here it ranged from low to high on a 7 Likert scale. And so like that, they could select that. And after that, they rank the 3 videos. So we force them to have a 4th choice ranking. This video allows us to validate 10 out of the 12 smiles that we used in these studies. And they were rated as the most appropriate smiles. For polite smiles are more appropriate in polite scenarios. So it allows us to validate the first 6. Mm-hmm. But still, we just show a scenario and a smile. So it was very controlled context. The next study is to measure the effect of a smile in a context, but still not in interactive context. So the way we've done it, so we looked here only at positive smile, polite and positive smiles, and we wanted to measure the impact of the smiles on the user's perception. How does he perceive the agent? And we had a female agent or a male agent that would say a joke, a riddle, and all of them had exactly the same patterns. So it was in French, but here the translation, the terms, good morning, I know a little riddle. What is the future of? I yawn, I sleep. So this type of joke. I mean, it's we found it a lot in kids carambar. In France, the kids eat those caramel type of candy, and they have small jokes inside, so we could gather quite a lot of small. And we produce a smile in very precise manners, before, after, and during the joke. And we use smile or no smiles, polite or positive. If we put a smile, it was polite or happy smile. And we had 242 participants. Hmm?
Bonjour.
Oh.
Je connais une petite blague. Qu'est-ce que c'est qu'un canif? Un petit chien.
Okay, so she
À une prochaine pour une autre blague.
Okay, so it's polite smile before, happy smile or that. And so after so we had a male or female, and we asked participants to evaluate them on a different stance. They were warms, engaged, I forgot the name, did I have it? Oh shoot, I forgot. So spontaneous, teeth, warm, enjoyable, boring, and cold. Okay. After that, we asked them, did they like the jokes? Did they enjoy the joke? And things like that. They found it funny. So we could have information on how they perceived the virtual agent, but also how it impacted how they interpreted the joke. Okay. And what we found is that there was significant impact of the virtual character smiling behaviors and gender appearance on the user's perception.
Excuse me. Yes. So did you find any result about the kind of bad quality of the synthesis? Did it change something to the perception of the joke? I mean, the pronunciation, you know, qu'est-ce que c'est? It doesn't sound very natural.
No, but the word, I mean, neither the animation is very natural. But since all the stimuli have the same voice quality, same animations, we're doing comparison study. Okay, so yeah, it is a problem, and it's really a problem for the latest study we've been conducting in a museum. That, for sure. Yeah, but we're comparing result. So we start very low, and we go just a little bit higher. Okay.
Because maybe you can change the way the text is written to make it more phonetic and get more natural.
I think we did it. Doesn't look like, but I mean, we did it.
Okay.
Yeah. But for sure, we could do better. But it's, as I said, for us, it's a black box, and we are not very sensitive to sound. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you choose the appearance of the male and the female? Like, how do you choose that haircut, or like how all these affects?
So I'm going to say it right after, because it was part of a project. And after, I must admit, once you have character, it's time-consuming to do it. We just use them. So it's a bad answer, because it doesn't mean that we really carefully choosing them, but how we've done it. So those two characters, I'm going to show them to you in 2 minutes. A part of a project. And yeah, they were a bit weird, but yeah. But nevertheless, looking at this quality of the animations, and by manipulating those few parameters, we did find out that we had an effect on smile. So the agents that were smiling will appear warmer. We have also an effect on the different type of smile. So either there was smile or no smiles, we found there was a difference. We found also that the difference on the smile type, so if it was polite smile or amused smiles. So when you use amused smile, the agent appear warmer and more enjoyable. And also more, I wouldn't use it word to word. Gender is more on the appearance, and that is what you found. The female characters was more spontaneous, warmer, and more enjoyable. And we put gender here, even though we cannot say it's a gender difference because we use only 2 characters, so we cannot claim it. But it's something you find also in human. Women appear more smiling, they appear warmth, and all that. And it's what you find all the time in our studies, is that all the stereotypes you have in humans, you find it again in the virtual agent. That is absolutely very difficult to go above that. We also find that the smiles had an impact on how the agent perceived. So here's the task. The task was simply the riddle. And they found out that the users prefer the riddles and just the riddle funnier when the characters express smiles. Okay? And the judge found the virtual thinks that the agents find that the riddle is funnier when it expresses smiles. So the social signal smile is used as a users by information on how to interpret the mental state of the virtual agent. And it also impacts the perception the user has of the message. So by just looking at one particular signs, you can measure different things. But to be able to conduct these studies, we needed to validate the type of smiles we were using. Okay? That's why it's important to conduct different studies. Nevertheless, in these studies, it's done, you show video to the person, the user was in front of the users, but it's not interacting. The user was not doing much. So we're conducting 4 studies where we wanted to have the user interacting with the agent. And what we've done is that we wanted to have the agent produce some smiles at given moments, and we wanted also to predict somehow, because we want the agent to manage the impression it's going to provide on the agent, on the users. We wanted to see how the users will perceive the agent during the interaction. So we've done these very simple models where we, based on the previous studies that we're just conducting on how the use of a polar smile of a positive smiles will affect the perception of the users, we simply built this matrix saying that when you produce a given smile, how it will affect the 6 variables along the social dimensions as neutral, low, or high. So we just manipulate them as soon as an agent while producing it. Oops. So, and we used, we put the agent in this scenario. So let me talk to you a little bit about this scenario. I didn't provide slide because otherwise it was too much on the virtual agent, but it was part of a Sorbonne project, and Sorbonne was the first project for us where we could have really an interactive agent. And the platform, it took us 3 years, really very, very hard work on having that. I'm going to show you, but I'm still proud. It looks really bad, but I'm still proud that we managed to have it at the end of the 3 years. And in fact, the end of this project was not the virtual agent, it was the human data. In fact, this human data has been studied quite a lot in Challenge. It still uses the main corpus. And so here the idea was to use 4 characters, and the 4 characters were designed along the 2 dimensions of emotions, the arousal and the valence. And the arousal can be positive, negative, positive. So for example, anger, where would you place it? It's high arousal and low negative valence. It's so anger is here, for example. Happy, positive, yeah. Sad is more here, and pragmatic here. So we design. It's not like that. If you look at a 2D representation of emotion, it's more complex, but still. But with the psychologists, we designed 4 characters in those 4 different areas. We had Spike, the bad guy. Obadiah, this one here, the gloomy guy. Poppy, the very happy one. And Prudence, the pragmatic. So the psychologists send us pictures. So we ask an animator to create those characters. And they gave us also a lot of information on how they should behave, the type of facial expression they would do, the type of behaviors they would do. And so from that, we designed those characters. And you're going to see an animation where we ask naive participants. Each of the participants had to dialogue with the 4 characters. And the aim of the 4 characters was to drive the participants towards their emotions state. That means Obadiah, his goal was to drive you to be sad. Spike, to make you angry, and things like that, okay? So that's why afterwards we were hoping to have emotional content on the users. Okay, that's why we said it's only to look at the users. And they could talk about any topic, absolutely any topic. The only thing they couldn't do, ask questions to the agent. The agent barely understood what is happening. They have some keyword spotting, that's it. So the users had to handle 3-minute conversation with an agent that really don't know what's happening. So we designed some sentences, and they had like 150 sentences, and they're just to drive the conversation a little bit. They don't bring content. And really, please look how she behaves, how she answers to the agent. Okay, I found it quite amazing. So like 30%, 40% of the data from the evaluation study was at this level. Mm-hmm.
Hello, my name is Obadiah. How are you feeling today? Is that so?
Yeah.
Tell me more about it.
You need to get some lamb seven, yeah. Lamb sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't really like to use put sugar in it.
Yeah.
Sugar, yeah. Sugar is the best. Just taste it off and then it tastes really good.
It can be so painful, can't it?
Oh, there's no, no, there's no sweet. Like strawberry tablets, no. I don't like doing smelling tablets. Have a taste.
What about when it all goes wrong?
We had nice surprise face there.
Sometimes when I get them, and they're like really small. For quite a while and you're not really supposed to try anything on them or anything. So that's probably when it could be wrong. So that's the tiny men. Do you? I don't really.
I don't suppose it really matters, though.
Oh, well, it might matter. It makes it feel better. It helps you. Because sometimes you don't value it.
Cruel world.
Sorry about it. But yeah, back in the bright side of the road,
Life wears you down.
well, yeah, it can be very tiring, but that's why you have to rest as well as work. And you can't burn the candle at both ends. So you can't. But then that's when life wears you down.
It all goes terribly wrong. What do you think?
What, life? What's life?
Okay, it goes on. But what is quite nice here, so she makes up. I mean, she's the one that makes sense of what he's saying, the guy. I mean, really. Like, for example, at the beginning, she says, oh, you have a problem with your throat. I mean, they don't understand at all. And she continues on this topic.
You really shouldn't be that miserable.
Because, I mean, she's doing all the work. And also, even though the back channels mothers are very crude, she still uses them to continue the conversation. So that's what is quite amazing, is that it's very, very crude mothers work
So if I need
in a conversation.
family,
It really, I mean, the back channels work, whatever is saying,
for your mum,
she responds to that. And she kind of respects also the turn taking and all that. So
I don't know you very well.
there's,
About you.
so there's things that we can continue on this agent. So that was really finished on, 8-9 years ago. So it's some time ago. Okay, anyhow, we use these platforms where we change the character. This Badia was no more the gloomy guy. It was, it could be showing either no smile or smiling behaviors, different type of smiles. And we have two conditions, a male and a female. And each users had to do a 3-minute talk conversations. And after we ask questions about their personalities and the perception of the ECA. After, for the evaluation studies, we looked at two things: the output of the models and how our models believes the users perceive the agent, and also how the users answer the questionnaires. And we do comparison, all right. What we found that there was a good prediction for cold and boring for the agent. The male social stance was better predicted than the female. And it means that we do have, there was weaker variation with the smile expressions. And of course we need to work a little bit more on this aspect. But it also may be linked to some things from human studies, like women are expected to be smiling, okay? So having them smiling or not, they're smiling. While you men smile less, so when they smile, it has a higher, it could higher impact on the perception. So that could come from that, but I mean, we cannot conduct on that. Okay, so we did have an effect on the smiling behaviors. Amazingly, participants didn't notice if the agents were smiling or not smiling. They didn't notice the differences. All right. Okay, so maybe I stop here and I am it's a 15 minutes break. Yes. And after we go for a very different way of conducting animation evaluation.
Questions, probably. So if you have.
Yeah.
Is this working? Yes?
Yeah.
So what are the good reasons to make machines a bit more, let's say, human?
So it's human, so it depends what you mean by more human. If you want to talk about realism, it's one thing. If highly realistic, so you don't know if it's a human or not, so there's a lot of people working on buildings extremely realistic agent for the voice or for the body. Or for us, we were working more on having the communication qualities, and is to maintain the engagement of an interaction. Okay, so that's by having the agent showing different communicative capabilities and social-emotional capabilities. So far, all the studies have shown that it enhances the communication, the interaction, and it enhances the engagement. That's what is driving us. Yeah.
Great. So.
No, okay, thanks. Okay. So we're going to continue by presenting some work we've been conducting a bit differently than what we've done. I presented so far. Is where we've been using some type of machine learning to drive the animation of the agent, where at this point it changed a bit how we should conduct evaluation study. So I'm going to present some work that was conducting by Yuding on a speech-driven animation. That was done, I think it was in 2013-14, so things have changed since then, but at least it gives you some ideas on how to conduct evaluation. So the input was speech features, so we use natural speech at this point, and the output will be 3D animation. And so I'm not going to present the work done on lip motions, but I'm going to present the work done on the facial expression, gestures, and head movement. And right now we're working on the gesture, but it's not really ready yet. So what we want to look is to find out what is the link between all those different features, try to capture how they're correlated, and also it adds a lot of dynamism to the animation. So in the animation I've shown you so far, I went through very fast how we were representing the intention to be conveyed by the agent, but they were done through an XML file where we specify that here show this emotion, here show these behaviors, here show this attitude and all that. So, and when nothing is specified, the agent doesn't do anything. So that's why the agent was showing some precise head movement, a smile, and things like that. And in between, not much. You can add a little bit of noise, but I mean, it's not there yet. Using this approach allows us to have much more dynamism because at every point we compute what should be the value of the head movement or the eyebrow movement or a gesture. So, but also you have a bit less control now. Oops, sorry. So the difficulty is that we have no explicit linguistic or informatic information, and also there's too many mapping between speech data and the motions. So the way we're going to do it is that we have the speech, we have humans data, we can train the models, and after we will generate that. Given the speech as input, we generate the motion onto the virtual agent. So we've learned the data to drive the head and eyebrow animation from the prosody. We've learned the data on real data. And here we want to capture also what happened with the previous data. So how the previous data impact on the current data. So Yuding developed this notion of joint fully parameterized HMMs that is able to capture the previous context on the data. On the next one. All right. So that means that the current state depends on the previous states and the contextual variables at time t. So having that, here are some examples.
I wish I could be brave enough to do that in the audition rooms. Sometimes cinematographers, they turn into filmmakers, don't they? And I don't know when your moment was, but I bet you there was one.
Okay. So having such animations, we conducted validations through objective measures for the contradiction error, that what you're using a lot, I think, in speech, as well as some perceptive studies. And we use different type of HMM to compare which one works best with different states. So we have the standard, in blue, standard HMM, separate full parameterized HMMs, and the joint full parameterized HMM in green. Okay, and we can find that for whatever number of states we have, the joint full parameterized HMMs had lowest error rate. For the perceptual studies, we're conducting two different conditions where we ask participants to evaluate the animations along 4 different conditions: intelligibility, naturalness, coherency, and synchronization. And where we had no motion in blue, only synthesized head, only eyebrows, and both. And what we can find is that in both, it's in blue, we have better recognitions in terms of intelligibility, naturalness, coherency, and synchronizations. Right. So by considering both modalities, head and eyebrow movements, we got higher result than considering just the head or just the eyebrows, and of course, no motions. All right. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to present 3 studies we'll be conducting lately. In fact, it's by Beatrice Biancardi and Sumia Demuth. They just finished their PhD not even a month ago. All right, whereas they work on 2 different themes, but they're part of the adaptation mechanisms. And here we're looking at interaction. So we want to simulate human-agent interaction, and we focus on that. And what we find is that in interactions, there's a lot of exchange of social signals, some imitations, synchronization of behaviors, adaptation, and this adaptations, imitation, allow to have rapport buildings, it allows to have managed impression, fosters engagement, and also provide information and manage interpersonal relationships. So it has a lot of functions. And so mentioned that. And what we found is that adaptations that increase rapports, signal interpersonal relationships, can be signals through many different signals and functions, such as different forms of imitation, of even verbal alignments, back channel, synchronization of behaviors, and things like that. And here I'm going to show you studies where we looked at adaptation happening at different levels. First, at the behavior level, so choice of the behaviors, conversational strategies, and also very low level as the cues. So let me start with the behavior levels. In these studies, we were interested in developing an agent that manages the impression it gives on the users. Okay, so we know that impression is formed in extremely rapidly. As soon as you see a person you don't know, you form an impression on her. And it can come from the appearance, it can come from a lot of stereotypes, characteristics, age, gender, cultures, the clothes, makeup, and all that. But also from the non-verbal behaviors. Okay, so here what we have is that we have a loop between the type of non-verbal behavior or even the appearance that will provide information. It will provide an information, but through your behaviors, you can manage the impressions you give. And the impressions can be measured through 2 dimensions that is often used in social science, warmth and competence. So we will build a model, we want to build a model of an agent that can manage impressions of warmth and competence it provides on the users by manipulating its nonverbal behaviors during an interaction. Because everything which is linked to appearance will be fixed during the interaction, and we won't manipulate it. So again, to do such developments, we conducted studies as before. So we looked at the corpus. And we used a corpus that we gathered in the lab, which is called the NOXI corpus, where we have 2 interactants, 2 humans, that were put in 2 different rooms, and they were communicating through a large screens. The idea that we want to see how it's happening, the communication, like in a Skype or with a virtual agent. That's why we have a screen between them. And the way the people were paired is we had people saying that I'm expert in different domains, and it can be movies, music, video games, travel, whatever. And we had other participants that we call novice that want to learn for a given topic. So at least when we pair the people, they had a topic of conversation that could go on. So it allows us to have quite natural conversations, and each interaction in general lasted around 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And having such a data, we annotated it into different manners. We annotated it on the videos, but we turned off the sound. So we have no sound. We didn't want it to have the impact of what is being said on the impression formations. And we annotated the videos of each participant along the warmth dimension and the competence dimension. So each videos were annotated along the warmth and then along the competence dimension. And we annotated also the videos on the behavior levels. We annotated as a gesture, communicative gestures. So it can be a deictic, it can be what we call a beat, which is rhythmic movement. It can be iconic, sometimes metaphoric. So we have also gesture. And we annotated also when gesture is at a rest. That means that during a communication, sometimes you're holding your gestures or you're doing that. And we annotated this rest position. We annotated also head movement and some facial expression. So once we've got that, of course, when you do some annotation, you have to do a lot of inter-agreement between annotators and all that. Well, I skip this part. But we were able to find out some association between some impression of warmth and competence and some behaviors. And what we find in red is positive association, and in blue is negative association, and in black is when you have no significant differences. And what we found is that, for example, the type of gestures, we have positive correlation between the production of bit for warmth and competence and a very high level for what we call additional units on the perception of warmth. That means any type of gesture you're doing, we have a shape. It can be iconic, deictic, or metaphoric gesture. It really has a strong impact on the perception of warmth. The perceptions on the smiles has what we call a compensation effect. That means if you smile a lot, you appear warmer, but you lower the perception of competence. Okay? So the more you smile, the warmer you appear, but the less competence you appear. So you have this compensation effect. While here we had a positive fact that it's more, we call it halo effect. And we have also some negative correlations, association with some rest position. For example, if you have no rest position, or if you put your arms down or the arms behind, it will be negatively perceived with a warmth condition. Okay? So once we have that, so that is come from human studies. We want to see if we have the same thing with a virtual agent. So we're conducting an experimental studies where we ask ourselves, is a virtual agent perceived differently in terms of warmth and competence according to its behaviors? And if so, what are the nonverbal behaviors associated with the warmth and competence? And moreover, we ask ourselves how we frame the virtual agent. Is it fully autonomous, or is it an avatar, that means driven by humans? Does it have artificial intelligence or human intelligence? And how it will affect the impression we get on the agent. Okay, so the independent variable here was the agent description. It could be either an autonomous agent, that means an AI that drives the behavior of the agent, or controlled with the DeVos settings. So we explained to participants these two settings, and we had the hypothesis that the agent descriptions will affect the judgment on the agent. And for that, we have a between subject experiment. So each participant could show either the agent condition or the avatar conditions. We had also other independent variables. That was the type of gestures, so bit or adhesion gestures, frequency of gestures, the type of response, and the frequency of smiles. And the hypothesis that we hope to have similar result as we had in the human study. And for that, we use within subject experiment. That means that for each participant, in one of those conditions, they will see stimuli where we will going to vary all the different parameters. So let me show you two examples.
When planning a journey, you have to plan 50% of it. This consists in collecting information from books and what people tell us, concerning, for example, monuments, places, and etc. The other 50% is total improvisation.
Okay, so here we have the same text, but where the manipulation of response, behavior type, and smiles vary.
When planning a journey, you have to plan 50% of it. This consists in collecting information from books and what people tell us, concerning, for example, monuments, places, and etc. The other 50% is total improvisation.
Okay, so the other dependent variable that we use was the perception of warmth and competence of the agent. And to measure the perception of warmth and competence, we did it through vocabulary. So we relied on study by Aragonés that describes warmth as being through several vocabulary, and we pick up 4 of them: kind, pleasant, friendly, and warmth. For competence, we pick up competent, effective, skilled, and intelligent. And people have to rate how they view the agent for each of the vocabulary along a 7 Likert scale of 7. So in a summary, we have the hypothesis here that different agent description will affect user judgment. So we have a between subject where we have the agent description, and for each condition in the agent description, we have a within subject where we have the type of gesture, frequency of smiles, and type of arm rest position that are manipulated. And here are the hypotheses we have for each of them that were coming from the study with humans data. Okay? So the data that we have is that for within subject, so we found out that there was some statistically differences on the perception of warmth and competence for the bits, the role of bits versus additional units in both things. So this hypothesis has been verified. While the frequency of gestures, we just found that highly significant differences for the warm condition, but we didn't find anything for the competence conditions. And we couldn't find a compensation effect of the smile. Regarding the first hypothesis, the description of the smiles, for the agent description, so between subject, what we found is that when the agent is to be said to be autonomous, so to be an artificial intelligence agent, we found some significant effect of the gesture types and response. We didn't find that when we said that the agent was driven by human intelligence, by a wizard of Oz. So just by framing how the agent was viewed, we didn't change, of course, at all the stimuli. They were absolutely the same. People view the agent differently. They interpreted the warmth and competence of the agent in a different manners. Okay, so that's why you have to be careful on all the conditions, all the variables you explain to your agent, because this one really had an impact. Okay, so once we have that, somehow we built the repertoire of the virtual agent, how we can manipulate the impression of form and competence, but that was done in a context-free manners. We show the video and we ask people to do that. Now we want to see if we can have an agent that can manage the impression of warmth and competence it provides during an interaction. So we wanted to study the impact of the effect of the agent that will adapt its behaviors, and the condition was the detected user impression. So we had two research questions. Is it possible to elicit different impressions of warmth and competence by adapting the agent behaviors according to the detected user's impression? And also, is it possible to influence user perception of the interaction, so the quality of the interaction, by maximizing agent's warmth or agent competence during the interaction? So the goal is we want to have the agent learn the best combination according to his goal, to appear more competent or warmer. So the way we've done it is by building systems where we have, you don't see it, but we have a users, we have a Kinect, microphones, so we can detect in real time this expression, multimodal expression. We have some body posture, I think, or so, and speech recognitions. So from the multimodal data, we can find out how users seem to perceive what is the impression of warmth and competence of the agent. That study, I don't present it here because it's conducted by colleagues from University of Geneva, and they developed such models. So we use it in our as a modules in this study. And after the impression manager of the agent is done through a dialogue managers and some reinforcement learnings, where these models will decide what to say next and how to say next. And the reward function here is the detected impressions. So once we decide what the agent should say next, we will look on determining how to produce a different communicative intention, type of gestures, amorous position, smile, and the verbal. Okay, so I'm going to show an example. Sorry, it's in French again, where we have the agent that adapts its behavior to the situation.
Tu vas pouvoir tester des jeux si tu veux. Ok. Tu vas pouvoir accéder à des simulateurs incroyables. Ok. Un simulateur de pilotage avec un vrai siège et un vrai volant, des pédales et tout.
Ok. Ok.
Le meilleur jeu de voiture de l'année.
Okay, so we conducted this experiment in the museum. It's a large science museum in Paris, La Villette, where we put the setting in a room on the side, and it was at the times where there was a video games exhibits. So the participants, the agent was playing the role of a virtual guide. So we gathered participants that were just visitors in the museums. The only condition that they had to be above 18 years old, otherwise it's too complicated for ethical reason. And we had 34% women, and we asked information about their age, because I mean we saw that video games, the age may be important, and so we had, this is a range of the people, so we had quite a lot of high range of people, participants, and we had 3 conditions where the agent wanted to appear warmth, the agent wanted to appear competence, and random, didn't care. And we considered pre-questionnaires and post-questionnaires. So let me show you the questionnaires. So the pre-questionnaires, NARS is used a lot in robotic. Because, I mean, a lot of studies show that sometimes you may have some either positive or negative a priori of robots. And we adapted the NARS questionnaires for the virtual agent. So, for example, here, so having interaction with the virtual agent, before seeing it, we ask it, I would feel uneasy if the virtual agent had emotion. I would feel relaxed talking with virtual characters. I feel comforted being with virtual characters that have emotion and things like that. So it's all the a priori one can have about the virtual agent. Okay. Regarding the independent variables, so we have the warmth, competence, and random conditions. So in the warmth conditions, the agent adapts his behavior according to user's warmth impression, with the goal to maximize her impression of warmth. The same for competence, while in random, the agent randomly chooses his behavior without considering users' reactions. Regarding the post-questionnaires, we have the different dependent variables are the same for annotating warmth and competence, so the same type of vocabulary, but we also ask questions about the overall perception of the interaction. So satisfaction, continue, I'm satisfied with my interaction, I would like to continue to talk. I like the characters, I've learned something from the characters, I want to visit the expositions, I would describe Alice as a complete stranger or a close friend, so the type of relationships, and she's like a computer or like a person. So the hypothesis that we have is that, the first one, is that the agent would be perceived as warmer when it adapts its behaviors according to users' warmth impression. That is, in the warmth condition, it's better than in the compared conditions. We have it the same for the competent. And also, when the agent adapts its behaviors, either in the warmth conditions or the competence condition, it will improve the overall impressions compared to the random condition. Okay, so participants coming in the room, they had to first fill in the questionnaires, the NARS questionnaires, then they were introduced to the agent, and after they fill in the 2 post questionnaires. What we found in the warm condition and the competent condition is that in the warm condition there was no significant difference, but a trend in the perception of warmth and competence. I forgot to mention, and that was done also, that when we conducting study, for example, in the warm conditions, people had to fill in information. Okay, about both dimensions. So even we manipulated only the warmth condition, we asked them to fill in also about the competence condition. So it allows us to get information on how the 2 dimensions are viewed with each other.
See, probably the recording now is not.
I stopped, and the video projectors. It could work. It's funny. It's.
Does it work? Let me check the remote control. The remote.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, sure, of course.
So when you said that they adapt to the user, right?
Yeah, to user's behavior.
Did you try to...
Oh. Well, okay.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
So was it some kind of model of how quickly to adapt, how much to adapt, or it always tried to kind of copy or imitate the user's behavior?
So, no, the way it was done, the adaptation was done at the speaking turn level. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, the impression management, let me show you. So if you look at so we have the systems that detect information about the user's signals and compute user's impression management that is sent to a dialogue manager, okay? And the way we've done it for the dialogue manager, it was very simple. We're not able to adapt the dialogue, what the agent says, when he has a turn. We can adapt it only to the next dialogue turn. So adaptation in this model, not in the next model, is done at the speaking turn level of the virtual agent. Okay.
Yeah, but even on the turn level, if it's smile, for example, you can smile a lot, or was it kind of like smile or not smile? So binary.
It was smile or no smile.
Okay, so there was no scale or like
no,
gradual.
Not in this study. In the last study, yeah, there's some scale, but not in this study. Yeah. So somehow it was almost as if the agent, you compute. That is it's going to be. I'm jumping to the conclusion, but it's as if what the behavior computing of the virtual agent is computed, you send it and it's placed. So you don't react on the fly to the user's behaviors. Yeah. Okay. So there was no significant difference, but what we could find is that considering the NARS result, that people that had positive a priori toward the virtual agent, they found that the agent was warmer than people that had negative a priori to the agent. It means that for people that have negative a priori of the virtual agent, we didn't succeed to make them change their mind. We need much more than what our technology is doing. However, for people that have positive a priori, they didn't go down, thank God. At least we got that. For the competence condition, we found that there was some significant differences, that the agent appear more competent than in the random condition. And when we were either in the warmth and competence conditions, there was a higher impression of warmth and competence, but not always significant differences. So for example, to maximize an outcome of the study is that we can have somehow for each individual participants which type of behaviors work best for them. Because, I mean, the system is learning and adapting to each participants. And we found that, for example, for these participants that view the agent as quite warm, for a maximum, it was a Likert scale of 5 here, a maximum of 5, that the gestures were no gestures, akimbo gestures, smile, and verbal supplication. I'm going to explain that. Okay, so in this study, we were able to adapt at the behavior level to maximize participant impression, and we found that the behaviors do play a role in capturing in the impression formations. But here we have in these models absolutely no models that ensure coherency of the behaviors of the virtual agent across turns, because they pick up through the Q-learning models, they pick up which potentially would work best for the agent, and we have no consideration of the conversational strategies. So that brings me to the next study, where we want to adapt the agent behaviors according to through its conversational strategy, and here we use users engagement. So looking at the literature, as John and Pittman defined among a little bit more, but we use only 4 conversational strategies in view of manipulating the impression of warmth and competence you can provide. So, for example, if you want to appear warmth, whatever your impression of competence you're going to give, you can use the notion of ingratiation. Okay? If you want to increase, you can increase your impression of warmth by decreasing your level of competence. You appear to be stupid and often you appear warmer, all right? And that is called supplication. And you can have the same strategy for competence. So you can use the strategy self-promotion, you simply be competence, but sometimes to appear competence, you can lower your impression of warmth to appear more competence. And to do that, we had our level of warmth and competence dimensions, and we can specify the type of behaviors we're going to provide on the different axes here. And for the verbal conditions, because it's conversational strategies, we couldn't find anything in literatures that is specifically linked to those 4 strategies, but we looked at work done by Pennebaker and Zoraida Kalira that came to my lab for a while, where by just manipulating the length of the sentence, the use of pronouns, the type of vocabulary, we change the type of formality of the talk and things like that, we could change the impression of for the different strategy. For example, in ingratiation, you can test some games if you want. Supplication, so it's informal. I don't know about other exhibits of the museum, so low competence, but you can test some game, it's cool. Self-promotion, in this exhibit, you can test some video games, and intimidation in this exhibit, you can try out some games on different platforms. So by manipulating just the set of words and lengths and the choice of pronouns, you or I, you can vary the conversational strategies. So here the setup was the same. So we have the users that is detected through Kinect and speakers. And in this work, we didn't have access to the impression modules, so we developed an engagement module. So we measured which level of engagement of the users based on its nonverbal behaviors. And we had, again, reinforcement learning algorithm that we select the strategies at each speaking turns based on the level of engagement. And the reward function was, again, the level of engagement. The study was conducting, again, in the same museums. So it was, again, on the same scenario. Here we had 75 participants. And in this condition, we have mainly, the majority of the participants were quite young compared to the other study. And participants had to answer NARS and the post-questionnaires. So in this study, the independent variables were the adaptation models that at every speaking turns we select which conversational strategy to use. And after, in all the other conditions, in the random condition, there was no models. It was choosing the conversational strategy randomly. In the ingratiation models, there was no adaptive models because it chose always the same strategy, conversational strategy, and the same for the other conversational strategies. The hypothesis was that in the ingratiation strategy condition, the agent in the ingratiation condition would be perceived as warm by the users. In the supplication condition, it would be perceived as warm and not competent, and things like that. And in the impression condition, the overall perception will be higher in the impression condition compared to the other conditions, because that's where we have the adaptive models. And also another similar hypothesis that the agent in the impression condition will influence how it was perceived in terms of warmth and competence. Okay? So the result of the study is that we found that in the supplication and glaciation, here the agent appears warmer, so we had significant differences in the warmth condition, while in the previous study it was in the competence condition. While in this, for self-promotions, the same level of warmth as supplication and glaciation had a positive effect on the level of competence. So we have what we call an halo effect. That means a positive effect on both conditions, both dimensions. So you recall that in every conditions, we ask participants to fill in how they perceive the agent along the warmth condition and the competence conditions, even though we modulated only one condition. And it allows us to find how by manipulating one condition, it affects also the other. One dimension, it affects also the other dimension. And that's how we could find out this halo effect. But we find that we have another negative impression here, negative effect, that when you increase the level of competence in the intimidation, the agent do appear colder. So that was manipulated. We looked also the strategy that the agent was producing along the interaction. So we had about 35 speaking turns, and that was a different, for example, here it depends. Here we can have ingratiation, intimidation, self-promotion, supplication, and you can see the type of strategy that the agent was using, and at the end, somehow there is that the systems arrive to find out one possibilities for the agent. So there's convergence for each of those interactions. Okay, so we can also look on how the type of condition we have that the algorithm found. It's another way of validating our algorithm. So we have adaptation of the strategy levels that maximize participant strategy in different conditions. And again, we have adaptation of the speaker turns. But in this one, there's one thing that we don't do at all, is when you interact, and if you want to have higher engagement, this is how to build rapport. And also, we have no synchronization. You mentioned, for example, agent smiles. The user smiles, the agent doesn't smile back. And there's no explicit adaptation at the signal level. So that's why we decided to conduct another study where here we aim to adapt the agent behaviors based on the user's cues. So it's really low level. So we want to develop a computational models that captures the adaptation of the interaction at the signal level. So no more as a conversational strategy or higher level behavior level. We want to predict the agent signals taking into account the user's cues, and also the agent should continue conveying its communicative intent. So to build such a models, we first analyze behavior adaptation in human-human data. So we have to learn a model from human-human data. Then we build a model that will predict how the agent should adapt itself. And after, we built a model that merge these adaptation behaviors with the communicative intention you want to convey. Mm-hmm. So to learn the models, we looked again at the NOXI corpus. That's the one I introduced, where you have expert and novice interacting with each other. And we're conducting some annotations and automatic annotation and some semi-automatic annotation for the conversational state who speak. We had some difficulties for detecting, taking out the listener back channels. And the models that learn the adaptation models, we use an LSTM model, so that allows us to model the sequentiality and temporality of the nonverbal behaviors over times. That means how the adaptation is buildings over times for that. So the input will be a sequence of features of the users during a sliding windows of n seconds, and we get data from both interactions. And so far, we looked at those data, smiling activities and smiling intensity, so on, off, and smiling intensity, head rotation, and the gaze. And the output is a predicted value of the 4 features. Once we've got these models, it allows us now to, given users' data, to predict what should be the agent's behaviors for the next frame. So we went back to our architectures where we have the users whose behavior is detected, and after is sent to this behavior prediction models based on LSTM that, given the behavior of the agent over a certain time windows, predict what should be the behaviors of the agent for the next time frame. However, the agent need to convey communication, it would need its intention, so we use our platform that I introduced before to compute its behaviors, and we merge both signals. The signals coming from the behaviors of the agent and the predictive signals. So I forgot to mention that these behaviors, these models, take input for the user's behaviors and of the agent behaviors. So it's the same as in human-human interaction, okay? So like that, we have the predicted agent model, the adapted model. Is it okay? Is it clear enough? Yeah? Okay. So a bit more. So as input, we have a time windows. We looked at 20 frames. We did several studies, and we found that 20 frames work best. So we have 20 frames from the user's behaviors coming from computational and analysis models, 20 frames of the agent behaviors that we computed before ahead of times, and the next frames, it will be a blend of the agent computing from the intent planners and from this predictive model. So given the frames, there's 20 frames of the user and the agent, the LSTM predict what happened for the next frame, and we blend it with this one. And we have the sliding windows up frame by frame. Okay? So that was done in real times, and so now we needed to evaluate this model. How does it affect the perception of the agent, and how does it affect the interaction? So again, we use the same scenario, same location in a museum, and we had 5 conditions where in the reference, the control conditions, we have no adaptations of its behavior, so it was just sending its communicative intent. We have in the head condition adapting only its head rotation, smile, gaze, and all adapting its head rotation, smile, and gaze according to the user's behavior. So the full adaptation model. For the evaluation again, we use the NARS questionnaire to find out the a priori attitude, and we use perfect models that were developed to look at different variables of the agent, so competence, realism, and relevance. And also we use as the IAS questionnaires to, I'm going to introduce that after, to introduce how the perceived friendliness of the agent, as well as the engagement and satisfaction of the users. So let me show you some of the questions we use to analyze those different variables. So for example, for realism, does it, Alice, for example, a real-life person's competence, is it effective, qualified, competent, or intelligent? Relevance, does it motivate me to go and see the exhibits on video games? Did she taught me something? Friendliness, is she kind, warm, agreeable, sympathetic? Involved, she gave me a good feeling. Distance, I dislike the characters. Satisfaction, I'm satisfied with my interaction with Alice. I appreciate Alice, and I would like to talk again with Alice. Okay, so that all those questions were answered after the interaction. So we had 101 participants, 50 female, and the result was measured through unpaired t-test. And what we found is that compared to the reference condition, the agent in the smile condition as well as in all conditions were appear more friendly, more involved, less distance, more satisfied. However, the agent in the head and eyes condition were not validated. We couldn't find a result. And again, we had effect on the user's a priori conditions. So we found that the smile and all condition, it works well. However, that's something that when you finish a model, it took us quite some time then to build all those models. I mean, it was quite time-consuming, quite difficult to have it done in the real times. You always miss something. Well, that is what you're doing. I mean, you have to continue. And what we found is that when we asked participants to come in, here it was, even though they were naive participants, they were still in a room and you ask them to do an evaluation study. So they want to do well most of the times, okay? So they were seated in front of the screen that we've seen on the image. It was the agent on a real size, human size. And it was about the same setting we tried to have in front of the tables, and as people were sitting in front of a table and things like that. And our models is based on human data, where we have participants interacting with each other, and humans move quite a lot. Well, here, what do we have? We have participants that want to do well in front of interaction with a virtual agent that really don't look so much like humans. And what do? They stare at the screen. They don't move so much. They're there. So when you build an adaptation models, what the agent do in the head, only head and gaze condition, they stares also. So the outcome of these adaptive models in the head, especially in the head and gaze condition, when there was no smile, it was staring at the users and moving less and less. That was too bad. That means that the adaptation models means something else. It's really, because we've learned the data from a different context, and we applied it to this particular context, which is a bit weirder, and so it didn't work. So that means that when the agent, we should endow the agent with higher capability to maintain the engagement, that when he sees that the agent is staring too much, maybe make something different to trigger a change of behaviors, or ask to talk more and things like that. So, however, so here we didn't do that. So in the future, we need to validate with different measures. One thing that we didn't do, and I think is very, very important to do in human agent study, is, so far what we've done is we analyze the data only through questionnaires, okay, how the users perceived the agent. We didn't look at all how it behaves. We didn't go and analyze when for example, imitation of smile or imitation of behaviors. We didn't conduct that. Because, I mean, especially in this data, we did it in an environment, quite wild environment. We didn't ask permissions to record users' behavior, so we cannot use the data to analyze that. But we really need to measure users' behaviors. We really need to measure how they are synchronized with each other. So we have quite a lot of synchronization measures. We can apply it and see how it goes well. And also, if we have behavior coupling, that means if user smiles, agent smiles back, would that reinforce user smiling? And we know, we conducted a study on that, and we know it affects the perception of the interaction. But we should measure it on that. Because what we found, and we didn't do it in our own study, we did it in other study when we work on emotion, is that sometimes you have a discrepancy between how people report questionnaires and how they behave. Okay, it's not always correlated that. Okay, so just looking at questionnaires, even though you may ask quite a lot of questions, looking at different variables and things like that, doesn't always gives you all the information. Okay. All right. So maybe a bit early, but I wanted to finish this class by showing you some questionnaires that we've been using. And so we're not psychologists. Psychologists, when they use questionnaires, they will use what they call validated questionnaires. So they've been using the questionnaires over the years and over different studies, and the questionnaires has been validated.
Okay, Katrina, let's give us more time to discuss. Actually.
Oh, sure.
And specifically, let's say on these conclusions, here the agent is seeing the user state, and the user state uses, as far as I understand, mostly image. We use the modality of, because you say...
there's no speech.
Yeah, there's no speech. So, but if we use other modalities like speech, then we have additional information, and even if the user doesn't move, the agent, as a function of the speech, and the speech has two levels, right? Has the low level and the high level. The high level are all these emotions that we can infer from the speech, and also the low level, what we say.
Yeah.
So, so that is so even if a user stares at the screen, then the agent, if he has the capability to go through understanding both levels, I guess that will be that will make this the data that you get. They will not be so, let's say, predicted or deterministic, but can be more difficult to interpret, probably.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So it is a balance, or a play.
Yeah. And another thing that is balanced is that, so I don't recall if it was linked to the nurse or not, but some participants, they were quite active at the beginning of the interaction. They were answering, talking quite a lot and things like that. But at one point, she discovered that the agent has a strong limitation, doesn't understand everything, not able to have a lot of conversation, and it breaks down. It really breaks down the interaction. You can see a drop for those type of agent, or type of users. So it again affects complete the interaction, because, I mean, they knew it was a machine, I guess, but they were disappointed. And how do you overcome that? Yeah. So, yeah, for sure, as long as you manipulate that. And also, for example, here, the agent, in the first movies I've shown you, the Semaine, the agent used quite a lot of back channels, because we focus on that. And you know how it is. So the system has been, all our research in the lab are implementing this research, nevertheless we lose things like that. So the back channels model was very poor.
So I don't want to monopolize this, but let's now, for instance, if there is a dialogue system and there is a goal, because if there's no goal, then it's very difficult. This video, for instance, as you mentioned, the agent doesn't understand anything. There is no but because it does something which is logical, then human's interpretation is that the agent understands, so they go on and on.
Yeah.
Now, if you try to put a bit of intelligence in the agent, then you risk that at some point you will arrive to the point, the break point, where the user will say, hey, what I'm talking about, you don't understand at all, so there's no point for me.
Exactly.
Have you, my question now is, have you worked on using dialogue systems, either rule-based or statistical dialogue systems in your experiments?
So here we're using Flipper, which is more dialogue-based, rule-based. Okay. So it's quite
based. So in this rule-based system, that means the goal is known for the user, right?
Yeah.
That the user has a goal, right? Or
So
no?
in this particular condition, so it's so compared to the semaine, it was a human that was driving the interaction, and the agent was just popping up sentences like that. Okay? So it was no, it was automatic. It was automatic. So we the choice of the sentence in the semaine was done through how the perceived emotion of the users, the length of his sentence, what the agent has said before. So we had several criteria, and because we've done it iteratively, we were computing based on those different criteria and some keyword, a little bit of keyword. We were computing what the agent should say next. But I mean, it was not building up a dialogue, because I mean, the sentences were a bit nonsense. Yeah, something like that. I mean, as you've seen in the video, so it was the humans making sense of what the agents were saying. Here it is different. Here is the agents-driven dialogue. So we didn't leave a lot of freedom to the users on what he could talk about. The agent was asking some questions, and in fact, it's when the agent was starting talking about something else where trouble started. Because I mean, the agent we didn't implement it in the dialogue system. Some repair or something to go back to it and things like that, yeah. So we should absolutely add those in the dialogue systems. We should have, absolutely.
Do you know if there are many, if there are experiments of with entrainment with the dialogue systems, for instance, either well-known like Alexa or Siri, or lab-based?
So in the community, in the virtual community, I don't know, because I mean, in our community, we were looking a lot at non-verbal behaviors. So people are not using so much Alexa or Siri, sorry. But, so there is some work that look at David Fromm, for example, at USC is working with very sophisticated dialogue model and with virtual agent. So that I would recommend to go and look at a study. And that I would say that you've got a lot. And there's some work on, for example, on, I don't know if you're talking about that, on verbal alignment and see how it affects the perception. So we're conducting a study where it was verbal alignment, where just on the like and dislike. So it was just on one particular conditions. Yeah. And Justin Castle is working a lot also on dialogue models for rapport buildings. Yeah. So, yeah. So,
Yeah. Sorry?
Yeah, sure.
So there is a group in New York that is doing something similar but with speech, with avatars. And in Zurich there is a group that is doing...
in Sweden, KTH?
No, Zurich in Switzerland. And so they're also doing human-computer accommodation or entrainment. And we too, so in our group. So
okay.
We're from here. In Saarland University. So yeah, also with Alexa, but it has some technical issues. But yeah, also.
So yeah, I don't know much about just speech, so my knowledge is really on non-verbal. So yeah, sorry for not mentioning the group for that.
Other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Okay. I haven't finished that. Sorry. No, I just very rapidly showing that nevertheless we do our cuisine when we pick up questions, build up questionnaires, but we realize most of the time on questions that is becoming quite common. So since you're going to have the slides, I just want to show that we have the social presence by Jeremy Balescens and colleagues. Godspeed, that is being used to annotate for robot, and we're using for virtual agent on anthropomorphisms, animacy, likability, perceived intelligence and perceived safety. There's quite a lot of questions, and it has been translated into different languages, so it's quite nice. This one, we have a presence questionnaires by psychologists, and you have loads of questions, loads of questions. And I just want to conclude that there is some work being conducted at the University of Delft, and they're calling for help around the community that they want to build standard questionnaires for our community, because all of us are building the different questionnaires and trying to build it. So what they found out is that a lot of the studies in our communities are using those questionnaires. That's why I'm presenting them earlier. So if you want to study and conduct study with a virtual agent, I will recommend using those questions so you can compare the work. And just to conclude, our platforms is on GitHub. It's available for to be used by the community. All right. And just to conclude, so what is important when you conduct an evaluation studies is to have evaluation at different levels, single behaviors that can be done in some context-free manner, so just signals, some forms of very controlled context, and I can often look at some recognition task. And after when you have an interaction, you can study the perception of the agent, the perception, the interaction qualities, and how it affects the task performance, the a priori effect. And something I didn't mention at all is this novelty effect. That's something, for example, that we haven't overcome, because each time we have participants coming and doing the evaluation study just for one shot. So, of course, like for any studies, the notion of replicability of the studies is important, and a direction that everybody's aim at is to have long-term interaction, and that our system is far from having such a things. Okay, so that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.